Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming today. So I wanted to quickly talk through my journey and how I got here. So to summarize a roadmap of where we'll be going, first I'm going to talk through a little bit of background about myself and some of the early years, high school, the classes I took, extracurricular activities I took part in. And I'm going to talk a lot, especially about the context of where you go to high school and developing a story and really trying to communicate to the college admissions committee about what you're passionate about and why you've been doing the activities and the courses that you've been doing and how they relate to the things that you want to achieve in the university, because I think that's a really important part of the admissions process. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my time at MIT as an undergraduate. I'm going to talk about the internships that I did there, extracurricular activities I took part in there as well. And then I'm going to talk about the year after university that I spent working at Goldman Sachs, and then 2 years as a researcher at the University of Chicago. And finally, I'm going to talk through a little bit about what I'm doing now as a PhD student at MIT. And then lastly, I'm going to open up the panel for questions. So some brief background here. I've actually lived in many places throughout my life. I grew up in Tokyo in Japan and Tehran in Iran in my childhood. And then in my adulthood, I lived in Chicago, New York City, and Boston. And currently, like I mentioned, I'm a PhD student studying economics at MIT. For high school and actually much of my childhood, I attended an international school. And I actually think that that also played an important role in my story when I was applying to colleges, because in particular, I got to make friends and talk to people from all these different countries around the world and really get to know different cultures, what schools are like in all these other countries. And I think that that played a really big role in shaping my interests today. And growing up, I think I had a very strong influence from my family and teachers. I think both my family and my teachers emphasize the importance of curiosity and, asking questions. Just because you learn something in class, what can you do about it? What can you read? Where can you get more information? Can you try to run some experiments on your own? And just really this love of like learning. And I think they also supported me through my passions and my extracurricular activities. And another important aspect that played a role in my sort of interests was the fact that my dad is a scientist and he always really encouraged me, to sort of pursue my interests. I think when I was 7, he bought me a microscope and we would take leaves and stuff and explore these. And I think all of that really shaped my interest in wanting to study science and engineering at the university level. So here's a brief timeline of my journey. So like I mentioned, for kindergarten and first through third grade, I went to school in Tokyo. And then for fourth to 10th grade, so sort of middle school and high school, I went to an international school in Iran. And then for the last 2 years of high school, I did the IB, that's the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. And I think that was actually sort of the first time really I really felt like I was able to really challenge myself and sort of study topics that felt more advanced. And I was able to score 43 out of 45 points, which is a 99th percentile internationally, a 99th percentile score. And the exams are actually, for those of you who are not familiar with the IB program, you sort of take these exams, they get flown out to, I think my year was Switzerland, but it's typically some country where there are graders that sort of grade all these exams in a centralized fashion. So it's extremely standardized. Everyone in the world takes the same exam at the same time. And then in 2013 through 2017, I was at MIT as an undergraduate. I majored in physics and materials engineering. And I felt like I had to work really hard and really go to office hours, talk to professors and TAs and sort of use every resource available. But fortunately, after all that hard work and I think a lot of long hours at the library, I was able to graduate with a 4.9 out of 5.0 GPA, with Phi Beta Kappa honors, which are given to the top 5% of the undergraduates at MIT. And then in 2017 through 2018, that's when I worked as a full-time investment banker at Goldman Sachs in New York. And I'll talk a little bit more about the type of work that I did there. Being able to meet with CEOs of very large companies. It was a very interesting and exciting experience. But I think ultimately I decided that research and graduate school was the right fit for me. And so in order to explore that interest, I took a pre-doctoral fellowship as a researcher at the University of Chicago for 2 years. And during that time, I took several classes. I actually wrote a paper with 2 professors at UChicago and applied for PhD programs. And then I was accepted to, several different programs, and I chose MIT again. And now since 2020, I've been a PhD student at MIT in economics, and I'm fortunate to be supported financially by the National Science Foundation Fellowship, as well as Oxford University's Global Priorities Fellowship. So first, I'm going to talk through quickly about my high school years, which are, again, to reiterate, 2009 through 2013. And I think this is a photo of me making liquid nitrogen ice cream. So the school structure, I think I would like to emphasize here that, I had a pretty unique background, even among those who were applying to MIT in general. I went to a small school from a country that actually doesn't send a lot of people to schools like MIT. And I went to the only English-speaking school. It was a very small high school. I think my cohort was about 40 people, and generally it was very low academic performance. And I think I made it a point to really explain that to my interviewer from MIT, and to really highlight that in my essays as well. I would say about a third of the people in my high school didn't even graduate high school. And so, for someone like me to then really try to apply to university, like elite universities, and to go and try to take these SAT scores, take advanced IB tests, and try to do well, I think that played a really large role in my admissions to universities. And, I think it was very rare in my high school for people to take part in summer programs, or, it was just a very different, a specific environment. And I think, I think that's fine. You just have to really make sure that you communicate that clearly when you're applying. And so for context, I got the highest score ever that anyone in the history of my school had gotten in the IB program, again, because, nobody had really tried to apply to schools such as MIT. So I was the first person to ever apply and be admitted to MIT. And while I was there, I think, so during the IB program, I was really interested in science and engineering. And so I took high-level subjects in math, physics, and chemistry. And for standard levels, I did English, literature, economics, and German. And like I mentioned, I got a 43 out of 45. I also did a large number of extracurricular activities, but I think interestingly, my extracurricular activities were more diverse. I think I was also very interested in arts. And actually in university, I also took, music theory courses. I took creative writing courses. I think, while my first passion was always in the STEM fields, I had a broad set of interests. And I think that's also fine. I think universities can really tell when you're passionate about what you do, and how they influence you to become who you are, and how they shape your interests. And they know that people explore things. And I think that's actually really a big plus. So I did piano, sort of classical music, for about 10 years. And I think the thing that I was very passionate about, especially in high school, and I wrote about in many of my essays, including the Common App essay, as well as my essay for MIT and Stanford, was about the art that I did. So, I painted a variety of media. So I did, acrylic, oil painting, pastels, and I had a very supportive teacher who really pushed me to hold a public exhibition along with several other local artists. And that was a really nice experience to be able to share my artwork, with a large audience and be able to talk through it. And I was also very involved in volunteering. And I think that was also very important in shaping my interests. I think for about 3 years, every weekend, I would go to a girls' orphanage and teach English. And, the girls were ages like 8 through 14. And it was very wonderful to be able to teach them and watch how people learn and share knowledge. I also worked at a local center for disabled adults, and I would typically work on art projects with them. And that was a chance to sort of take my passion for art and put it to good use to help people who, are really seeking community and maybe just need a little bit of encouragement and support. And also in my high school, I was very involved in typically, tutoring my classmates who were struggling in classes. And actually, a lot of my teachers would seek me out to help design the classes that were being taught. They often had me grade exams, or I was sort of already like a teaching assistant in high school. And I think that really was important too. When I asked those teachers for recommendation letters, I think they were really able to talk about how I know that at least they communicated with me that something that they highlighted was that, one, they thought that I was very compassionate and helped my classmates who were struggling, and took my sort of academic aptitude and my ability to do really well in classes to help others succeed as well, and that I was very mature for my age and was able to sort of behave in capacity as a teacher in part. So the timeline for applying to college. So because I didn't have a lot of mentorship and I was sort of the only one from my school applying to these types of universities, I was a little later than average. So I took my SAT, both subjects and regular SATs in my last year of high school. So that's typically considered quite late, but I only took them once and I was fortunate to do quite well. And so that's sort of one thing to consider. I did spend quite a bit of time preparing. I bought the textbooks. There's a lot of online resources you can use to practice for these standardized exams. And so I got above a 2200 on my SAT. And in particular, I did very well in the math section, which I think is what schools like MIT and stuff care most about and less about English. And I received these predicted IB scores that my teachers sent in report cards to universities. I also started thinking about which teachers I wanted to ask for recommendation letters. That's very important. I think universities take it very seriously, who these teachers are, how well they know you, and what they have to say about you. I also took SAT subject exams, which I believe actually are no longer a thing, but at the time they were very important, and I know MIT especially really cares about them, and they actually mentioned on their website that they care about those subject tests more than the regular SATs. And so I did physics and sort of math level 2, which is the advanced version of math. I got a perfect score in the physics and I got a 790 out of 800 on math. I reached out to my teachers for recommendation letters, and they were very happy to write them for me. And they even told me that, they wrote the strongest recommendation letter that they've ever written for anyone in my school. I also spent a lot of time, these essays, I would say start them early. I started, with bullet points in the summer, and, sort of every weekend I would go try to write more, think about what I want to say, read online. The internet has great resources. You can find great examples of successful essays, but make sure you don't copy them, right? Like, you want to have an original voice, and universities really care about that. And I would even take time to talk to my peers and my family and my teachers, my art teacher, and try to get their perspective on what my story is and what these people think makes me special. And I think having this coherent story, communicating your passions very clearly to universities in America really, really matters, and it really affects your chances of admission to a competitive program. I was accepted to Stanford, Columbia, and MIT. It was a difficult decision, but I think ultimately I really wanted to go to a STEM-focused school, and that's why I chose to go to MIT. After going to a high school where I felt like I was the only one who was so passionate about physics and chemistry, I was really excited to go somewhere where I could meet a lot of other people who thought about the world in the way that I did. So, like I mentioned, essays, I think, in the American university process matter a lot. In particular, they read thousands and thousands of these essays, right? And if they all sound the same, I think they're going to forget you. And I think it's really important to tell a unique story. And they really want you to be authentic. It's not necessarily about writing about your most impressive accomplishments. It's about really telling an authentic story. So currently, for the past 4 years, I have been serving as an interviewer for the MIT admissions committee. So every year I interview 4 high school students, and I write these reports and I recommend them for admissions. And at least what I look for in these interviews, and they'll sometimes talk about what they've written about in their essays as well, is really self-awareness. How thoughtful are these people about what they want to do? Are they just going to university because it's prestigious, or because people told them that they should do this? Or is there really some genuine thing that they want to gain? What is their reason? What are their passions? What do they care about? And what kind of actions did they take? Did they do summer camps? Did they publish a book? Did they, really compete in like a sport that they're passionate about. Like, what have they done to achieve their goals and why? And sort of really understanding that perspective is something that I look for. And that is my understanding that that is what a lot of these competitive universities look for. And like I mentioned, context is key. You want to tell them about your family, where you come from. It could be the town that you grew up. Maybe you're really passionate about environmental economics because the town that you grew up in is very polluted, and you spent a lot of your childhood recycling and trying to understand the biological risks of pollution, and trying to think about how you can become an engineer and design clean energy solutions, for example. And that is actually a story of someone I know personally who went to Yale. And I think, really giving that context of how your interests have been formed and what your high school was like, what your teachers were like, what your classmates were like, I think that's very interesting to them. And I would, really make an effort to communicate and show them your world very clearly in your essays and in your interview. And so for me, I think one thing that really differentiated me was the fact that I took this high-level IB physics class that wasn't even offered in my school. I told them I'm really interested in physics and I want to take the advanced class. And they were like, well, nobody else wants to learn this, so we don't really have a teacher for you, but we can have the exam shipped here so that you'll be the only person taking the exam, but you're going to have to do all your experiments by yourself. You're going to have to study by yourself. You're not going to have a class. And I think that was something that really differentiated me, because I basically had to make a schedule. And, I behaved as if I had a class, right? 3 times a week, I would read these book chapters. I would go watch YouTube videos, anything I could find to learn the material. And 25% of your IB grade is these experiments that you run and the lab reports that you write. And I basically would just go to a science lab in my school by myself and design experiments and run them, and try to find a teacher to talk to about it. But I didn't really have a formal teacher. And I think talking about that in my interview and writing about that, I would guess played a really large role. And ultimately, teaching myself with no classes, just with the books and sort of the internet, I was still able to earn a perfect score on my physics exam. And I think I was very proud of that. And I think it really paved the way for how I viewed learning. And yeah, so again, just to reiterate, the story really matters. I think in my essay, I think I had a pretty atypical essay for the typical person who goes to MIT and studies engineering. I know many people wrote about, coding or robots that they build. I did a lot of lab experiments and I designed them myself. But I think what I really wanted to talk about was how much I also enjoyed art, and how, you can be someone who wants to become an engineer while having other interests as well. And I actually think that, painting really helped me realize at the time that I wanted to do engineering. And my essay was largely based on painting as a way of augmenting and making reality more beautiful and adding your own sort of creativity to the world as it is. And actually, the admissions officers from Stanford personally emailed me saying that they really enjoyed reading my essay about finding my voice as an artist and how that shaped my interests. And I think that was really special to me, to receive an email from Stanford, knowing that they clearly read my essay and that they found it to be very moving, and that played a large role in my admissions. I also was very clear that I wanted to major in physics and material science, and that's actually exactly what I majored in. And so I think, you don't have to know everything that you want to do early on, but I think they do care that you've thought about it and that you're certain you're not just going there and going to major in a popular major. You genuinely have interests. And I also talked a lot about my unique cultural background, the fact that, my mom and dad are from different countries, and that I went to an international school. And I think that was also important. Some reflections and advice from high school, I would say, learn as much as you can about these different universities. Stanford, Columbia, and MIT were all very different. And I spent quite a bit of time understanding the culture, how the professors treat the students, what kind of classes you can take, what the student body is like. I spent a lot of time researching that. You can get a lot of that from the internet or just reading blogs from alumni. You can go look at LinkedIn profiles of people who went to these schools. And I think that
对不起啊，看一下。
And I think, I also would say that really try to spend time to figure out what makes you tick and what you're good at. Explore, read, try different activities. take advantage of the resources. So the one thing that my school had was IB, and I took advantage of it. And I think they certainly care that you utilize every resource available. So if my school had AP courses, I would have certainly taken AP courses. If there's local competitions you can take part in, I would say definitely do that. But like I said, universities will take into account the context of your school. And so if they know that your schools don't offer them, they really will take that into account. And do extracurriculars. You need good grades to get into these competitive schools, but that's not enough. I think they look for personality and interests and passions as well, and a dedication to really shine and go above and beyond. So do a few activities and do them well. So next, I'm going to talk a bit about what I did at MIT. And I attended MIT from 2013 through 2017. So, I did try to explore several majors before settling on physics and materials engineering, even though that was originally what I wanted to do in high school. So I sort of explored and then decided that was actually what I was passionate about all along. I did spend a summer, my first year summer, I worked in an inorganic chemistry lab. I did 2 consulting internships in New York City, at Accenture and Oliver Wyman. And I also did an internship in trading at Goldman Sachs. So every summer, once I got to MIT, I pretty much every summer I was doing an internship. And it's great, first of all, they pay you. And second of all, it's a great opportunity to try out different jobs, live in a different city, and really develop that professional network, which I think is very important. I was also involved in a large number of extracurricular activities. So I was the president of the MIT Energy Club. I organized a career fair. And so I actually got to work directly with these companies. And that was great. So when I was looking for jobs, I had all these different company contacts and they all knew me. And I think that's a very helpful connection. So if, every university has career fairs, if there's a way to get involved with career fair organizing, I would highly recommend it once you're at university. And I also started a research conference for undergraduates to present their work. I applied for this grant at MIT, so we got a $10,000 budget, and that was also very exciting. And also build a really large social network. If you're fortunate enough to go to a university like MIT, these people go on to become very successful, right? And so I think try to have, different types of friends. I have friends who are in Harvard Medical School, who are in Harvard Law School, who work at hedge funds, who work in investment banking, who've started their own companies, who work at Google, and really try to learn from these people. And later on, it'll be really helpful for receiving advice. If you want to switch jobs, they'll help you practice for job interviews. I think it's one of the best things that a university can offer, in addition to, of course, academic training and rigor. So, yes, extracurriculars, the Energy Career Fair, being the president of the MIT Energy Club, extracurriculars are really helpful. I think it basically, again, it helps you really learn logistical skills that were helpful for my full-time job. Learning to manage a club, it's 30 students. It's a really good skill later on in life. You're going to have to manage people either at a job or even in graduate school. I was also involved in a sorority, which I think is actually a very unique feature of American universities as well. My sorority was known to be a very academic sorority. And so we had Rhodes and Marshall scholars. I think about 6 students in my sorority. My year went to Harvard Medical School. We had a lot of investment bankers and traders, PhD students at top fields. We even had, sort of Olympic level figure skaters. I think that's an excellent network. In terms of academic extracurriculars, I worked as a teaching assistant while I was an undergrad. I think that's actually quite rare. So I think that actually helped me get into a PhD program. It was very helpful. Pretty much every week, I would teach 20 MIT undergraduate students. I would write problem sets. I would write exams. I would grade them. I worked directly with 2 professors to design the syllabus. And I also had office hours and review sessions. It was great practice for both my full-time job as a banker as well as my current role as a PhD student, because now I have to teach undergraduates again. So it was great practice. I also did a lot of mentorship, I think, continuing from high school. A 1-week program to introduce first years at MIT interested in materials engineering. I worked as an associate advisor to help first years pick their courses. I also taught a 2-week program for local middle school students, where we basically helped them run experiments, teach them how to build circuits, things like that. It was extremely rewarding, extremely fun. And I think it was a way to share my passion for engineering. Um, and I think once you're, at a university, do all the internships that you can. They're great opportunities. Try different things. I did a research internship at a chemistry lab. I got to use all this like fancy equipment, like an NMR is like a $5 million device. It's cool. I'm glad I was able to use it. A mass spectrometer, data analysis tools. I don't do chemistry anymore, but I think it was still a very good experience to just be able to first realize that I didn't enjoy chemistry in a lab, and also to just learn how to use this equipment. I think it was a very exciting opportunity. My second year summer and my third year winter, I worked in consulting. Those were great opportunities as well. I basically got to fly to Ohio, as a 20-year-old and meet like the CEOs of these companies and work with this team of full-time employees. I got to, look at the private data that these companies had. I got to look at how much they're paying people, how much, what their financial statements are like, and sort of help them become more profitable. And that was very interesting. My third year summer, I did a trading internship, and I got to try out things like I got to basically watch traders trade mortgages, foreign currency, and I also got to, do some coding and learn about algorithmic trading. And so, as an example of how cool some of these internships can be, I think, 19 or 20 here at the time, and I got to take a photo with the CEO of Accenture. I mean, this is a very large company, and he actually met with all the interns that summer. It was incredible. So reflections on college, I would say, the first year of college is a great time to try new experiences. Join all the clubs that you can. You have time to declare your major, so play around. Take all these classes, work in a lab, or other things if you're a humanities major, and challenge yourself. I think if you're interested in doing a PhD, take PhD level courses eventually. Internships invaluable. Even if you think you want to go to graduate school or law school or medical school, I would say at least try to do one corporate internship. It builds professional skills, and just make sure that maybe you'll love it. I think it's a really good opportunity. Build a wide network. Don't limit yourself to one group of people. Try to have friends from all kinds of fields. You'll never know how it'll be helpful later on, and you'll just really learn a lot about different things. Develop a general set of skills. My recommendation is definitely take at least one or two computer science coding classes. Learn statistics, take a business course, get good at writing. I think these are general skills that no matter what field you enter, I think you definitely want to know some of these things before you leave your undergraduate degree. And talk to professors, older students, mentors, and alumni. MIT had a website that basically let you find any alumni, like anybody who went to MIT ever. Their email and phone number is there. And I really just emailed these people. Sometimes they were 40 or 50 years old. They almost always responded. They're happy to talk to you about their job. They're happy to help you find internships. They'll help you edit your resume. They're really excited to talk to you. And I would say take advantage of those alumni databases. I certainly did a lot of that in undergrad, and it was invaluable. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my post-college experience. So like I said, I worked for 1 year at Goldman Sachs, 2 years at UChicago, and now I'm doing a PhD at MIT. So my 1 year when I worked at Goldman Sachs, I worked in industrials, mergers and acquisitions. For those of you who might not know what that is, you basically get to advise large companies, so over $500 million in revenue, on decisions such as whether or not they will IPO, whether or not they'll sell their company to a private equity firm, whether they'll issue debt or merge with a competitor. Very cool experience for that 1 year. I got to actually meet with multiple company CEOs. I got to fly to DC, Florida, Connecticut. I got to travel across America. Some of my colleagues got to travel internationally as well. And you really get to watch these shareholders, board members, CEOs, CFOs, all of them talk about, really high stakes decisions. I actually worked personally as on a team of 5 people on two deals. They both have news articles in the Wall Street Journal. So the TI Automotive IPO in 2017, they raised $500 million in that IPO, and I worked on the Pitney Bowes sale in 2018. The company was sold for $360 million. again, I think that year was very helpful in that it helped me build a general skill set. You get really good at managing tasks. You get good at presenting. You learn how to work with sensitive data. So all of this is very confidential, and sort of learning how to handle sensitive data, because some of these companies are public and basically their stock prices can move. And so I would say learning how to do that is very important. Sorry, I think something is okay. Let me know if you can't see my screen. I think you can.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yeah,
It's just become a little bit smaller. Maybe you can. It's okay. How to make it bigger or
yeah. I know I got a little small. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, but it's still okay. No worry. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about University of Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
So then,
So then, I worked at the University of Chicago. Let's see. I don't know how to make it bigger, but so there, I worked directly with 3 different professors, and one of them is the author of Freakonomics, if you've read the book. I actually got to work on an academic paper with one of the professors as an author, and we submitted that for publications, and I'm still in touch with these mentors. And also, I think importantly, provided an insight to what a career as a full-time academic would be like. During my time at U Chicago, that's when I decided I wanted to do a PhD, basically. I also got to take math classes and real analysis and statistical theory. I got to take computer science classes like machine learning. Great experience. I think it was very helpful for my career as an economist now. And I spent a lot of time talking to PhD students there, and I decided to apply for PhD programs in economics. And that brings me to where I am today. So today I'm a second-year PhD student at MIT studying economics. And to tell you a little bit more about what I do and why I love it, and you just heard about my long journey of getting here and finding out what I'm interested in. So I obviously really loved physics and engineering earlier on, but I think I liked the math and the quantitative skills, but I was more interested in studying how humans behave. And so economics really does that. You study human behavior in an organized society. You think about laws, financial incentives, companies, families, and how they all interact. And what's great about this PhD program is you receive very broad skills that are useful. So many people from economics PhD programs will go on to work at Amazon, Google, or the World Bank. You can really work in any field. You can work in tech, you can work in finance, and you can work in public policy. Because you build these general skill sets in data science, you pretty much are going to be coding all the time as part of your job. You learn statistics and how to model different financial situations. You learn, how to model companies, how to model stocks. And some of the questions that we study are things like, what is the optimal tax level? Or how can we improve health insurance programs, such as Medicare in the US? Why do CEOs get paid so much? Or does Google have too much market power? And I think these are really important questions. And many of the alumni from the MIT Economics PhD program are now working on these, either as chief economists at Google or in Washington, D.C., making these laws. So I think that's really exciting. And here's just a little bit of a fun fact about something that happened this year. So this is Josh Angrist. I took a class with him this year. He won the Nobel Prize in economics this year. And so this photo was taken from a celebration of his Nobel Prize win. And basically, these are 5 professors who are currently in my department, in the economics department at MIT, who have all won Nobel Prizes. And so they took a photo together. So that was a very interesting experience. And I feel very, very honored to be able to learn from such brilliant scholars. And so that's all I have. And thank you for listening. And I'm available for any questions, and I'm happy to take your questions now.
好，那我们现在进行 Q&A. Yes. Are you ready? 我们的麦克老师，Mike will be the host, and okay, and with Nagisa. Okay, great, yeah. The funny session coming. Yes, okay. Go ahead. Yeah, let's start the Q&A session.
Yeah, Nagisa, nice meeting you again. I guess we have a lot of good questions for you, and maybe you can pick 3 or 4, and to to give your best honest answer?
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, so I think a lot of the questions are really great. I'm going to try to pick the ones that I think are, maybe most general and hopefully helpful to people. So the first one I think is from Jerry, that asks, thank you for sharing. One quick question. What are your suggestions for finding the right major in both undergraduate and PhD, which are different? So I think that's a really good question. I think, picking a major, so I actually was pretty methodical about it. I think I literally made a list of pros and cons and really tried to think about it. So for undergraduate, I would say, you have to balance things so there's three balances, right? There's one dimension of things that you are good at. And then there's another dimension of things that you enjoy. And there's another dimension of things that are useful and practical and will get you a job that you want, or will help you go to, if you want to become a doctor, it'll help you become a physician, or if you want to, go to law school, it'll help you do that. So you have to sort of balance all of those things. What you're good at, I think is important at the end of the day. You'll know, I think by the time you get to undergrad, you'll take a bunch of classes in your first year and you'll see, which classes you're naturally better at, which professors you like, what makes sense to you. So that's one thing to take into account. In terms of what you enjoy, again, the only way to figure it out is to try different things. Like I said, I took all these different classes in different departments. And in undergrad, I did find that sort of physics and then also materials engineering, which is a mix of physics and chemistry, that was sort of the core courses that I was best at. And in terms of usefulness, like I said, I think going to university's alumni site and finding, what these people majored in and what jobs they have now is a great way to see whether it's useful for your goals, right? For instance, if there's a job that you want and everybody who's in that job who went to your university majored in something, maybe that's a good sign that this will be helpful. I generally think that, one of the most useful things to major in right now might be computer science and statistics, to be completely honest. And I say this because I have friends who are medical doctors, but they studied computer science. Or, I have a lot of friends in the economics PhD program who studied some form of statistics or computer science as well. So that's, another thing to consider, right? Of course, it depends, you have to be good at it, you have to enjoy it, but there's an element. But I think in general, as long as it's reasonably quantitative, you're going to be okay. So like if you do any form of engineering or physics, you will have to do some math and data analysis, and that'll prepare you for a lot of jobs. Or like business or economics, that kind of thing too. So that's sort of, how I went about it. And then in terms of a PhD, I think it's similar but different. I think the PhD is more specialized. And so I think that's where, you already have an undergraduate degree. So if you have a useful degree, you're good, I would say. So the PhD is really more about what you love. You're not going to spend 6 years producing research on something because it's useful. I think that's, getting an undergraduate degree that's useful, probably a good idea. Getting a PhD in something that's useful, I wouldn't recommend it. So that's where I think really what you're good at and what you love would matter the most. And I think for me, I was really interested in questions about healthcare and how people get jobs and how we can reduce unemployment and how we can give more people higher quality healthcare. That's something that I care about and I enjoy. And I think, I think my 2 years at Chicago helped me realize that I'm decent at producing that kind of research. So that is how I make that decision.
This just made me feel better because both my parents are medical doctors. They tried to make me a medical doctor, but instead I took the computer engineering.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
do you have a next question you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I think this one just came in that says, how do you manage your time and how do you relax yourself? That's, I think, a really great question. So to be honest, like I said, because my high school was, maybe less competitive compared to like the types of other people who were at MIT, I think I really learned how to do that at MIT as an undergrad. And, some things that I did, I'm sure people already know this, but like having a calendar and being like really organized with it. I mean, like really like every single thing, make sure you put in your calendar. A lot of times I will even like block off time. So for instance, like I'll decide on Thursday, I'm going to spend 3 hours doing this specific thing. And if it's in your calendar, I think, it just helps you sort of psychologically do that already. Another thing I started doing in undergrad that I still do actually is I have this Google Sheets, and every academic year I have a new Google Sheets, and it has columns for each of my classes and rows for like the number of hours of homework, the number of hours of lecture, the number of hours of class, the number of hours I go to office hours to talk to professors. And you have to keep it simple, otherwise you won't log your hours. But I always, every day I write, how many hours I put, like 2 hours of class, 3 hours of homework, 4 hours of office hours, 1 hour of doing research. And that way, and I do it every month. I have a different like spreadsheet tab for each month. And so that way you get to see, oh, I worked 100 hours this month, or, oh, I spent like 150 hours, and you get to compare. And that helped me manage my time, because you can't like trick yourself. You have all the data there, and you will know how hard you're working. So that's something that's really helped me, and I still do it as a graduate student. And that way also, if you're like going to class, but you're not like doing as much studying or homework, you can clearly see like, oh, I'm tired because I'm going to so much class, but I'm not doing as much homework. And maybe that means you should drop a class, or, it'll help you sort of manage your time that way. In terms of relaxing, I will say, I don't think I was very good at relaxing in undergrad. I was stressed out all the time. I was working really hard. You can maybe keep that up and then I worked at Goldman, where I basically didn't relax, but I don't think that was good. I think I learned to relax when I was in Chicago. And that's when I started, spending more time doing hobbies. So like right now as a graduate student, I think I would go crazy if I didn't relax. And so, now in the winter, I try to go skiing with my friends sometimes on the weekend. And, I'll say, today I will not do work. Like, I'm not going to open my computer. I'm just, going to do this activity. And typically I enjoy physical activities. So I do Taekwondo, I do yoga, I ski. So those are the things that I do. So that way I'm like, oh, I'm like exercising, but also it's very relaxing. So that's what I do. But I think it's important. I think you should, maybe in undergrad, I think it's really hard, but eventually you learn to find like things that make you happy outside of your work. So that's what I do.
Okay, that's great. Actually, when you interview the candidate applying MIT, so normally do you ask them any classical questions or?
Yeah, that's a great one actually. So yes, I think there's kind of like stuff that they tell us to ask. I mean, some of it is very general, like what would you expect, like tell me about yourself, like what have you done, what do you want to study and why? And I think, and we were asked to prepare like a 2-page report, so it's pretty detailed. And I'm always taking notes while I'm interviewing them. So I would say, best way to prepare, at least for the MIT one. I haven't interviewed for any other school, obviously, because I didn't go to those schools. Yeah, I think again, like, having a really good answer for like what you want to study, and being honest, like saying that it might change, but I want to major in this, and these are the things that I've done towards it. That's a really important one. If you sort of look like you're not really interested in majoring in anything and you haven't done anything, I think that's probably not great. And one that I like to ask, that I've been asking often, that MIT hasn't necessarily put in their like recommended questions list, is I usually like to ask like how the person grew in high school and one thing that they really learned about themselves. And I think that's a way for me to get at, I think for some, in my opinion, I'm still very young and I haven't accomplished that much, obviously, but in my humble opinion, I at least the people I admire, I feel like, are constantly trying to like grow and learn from their mistakes, and are able to admit that honestly, or at least they take the time to think about it. And so like, I don't know, I at least look for people who say, things like, so one person that I knew, that I wrote a very strong recommendation for after I interviewed him, and I think he was waitlisted at MIT, but he didn't get in, but that's still a pretty good outcome. I think he had told me that he, in the middle of high school, had to move out from a city into this like very small town where he didn't know anyone. And it actually gave him a lot of depression, and he was really struggling with school. And he was a top student in the city where he was, but moving. And he was so open and thoughtful and talking about, why that move was difficult and what he did to get out of that. I mean, it was so impressive. He was like, I basically started, and he wanted to be he wanted to do like film and computer science. And so he said he basically started doing all these projects in coding, and also started he made films and sort of did all of these things. And that really helped him cope with this new city and not having as many friends. And I mean, I think that level of self-awareness and concrete actions that you've taken, most people cannot give that kind of answer. I mean, I had some people basically say things like, I learned how to study harder. And I was like, well, I don't think that's a very compelling answer to give your interviewer. So yeah, I would say that's the kind of stuff that at least I ask. Because we expect everyone to have good grades and stuff. But
right. Actually, well, how about one last question? Pick one of your favorites from the list.
Yeah. Okay. So another one that I liked was someone was asking me about my high school experience, where they were saying, was your high school an IB school? They didn't provide the class, so how did you pass and get the score? So that's a great question. So my school was an IB school. But actually, I think it's not uncommon that schools will just not offer certain subjects, but people who go to school, elite universities at Harvard and MIT, I've heard of other stories of people whose school didn't offer an AP class and they just studied it on their own and took it. So I think this is a thing that can commonly happen. And I think the way you do it is you literally go talk to your principal and your teachers and say, I have a plan. I want to take the exam. And you have to be very organized, right? Show them that you've bought the book, show them that you have a plan, and basically ask them to I think there's a fixed fee that they have to pay to be able to get you an exam. But other than that, they don't have to do anything. And so I think it is very doable. I know of multiple people who've done this with their schools. As long as your school is an IB school or an AP school, there's usually a way to be able to take a subject that might not necessarily be offered. And yeah, I would say the best way to do it is come with a plan and go talk to the teachers and principals and convince them and give them a good reason. So that's the way to do it. And then obviously you would have to go through the trouble of, just studying and doing that. But that's sort of up to you and not up to the teachers.
That's great. That's great answer. Thank you very much, Nagisa.
Yeah,
Nagisa.
no problem.
Thank you
so much.
I'm going to see you, I guess, May the 27th. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm very excited
to see you. Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to everyone.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Bye bye.
各位直播间的小伙伴们，我们把那个时间呢交给我们的 Venus 啊 ，Venus 是我们大同教育的中国团队的总负责人啊。那 Venus 呢，他也是一位非常非常有经验的老师，他是中国这个英国这个著名的私校，1564年的私校，在中国区的首席运营官，香港科技大学的 MBA， 法国巴黎的商学院的 MBA。另外呢，他也是深圳市女性领导力促进发展委员会的理事啊，香港国际教育学会的会董，然后教育行业15年的高管经验。我非常感谢啊，他做了非常非常漂亮的 PPT 跟我们来分享。他是我们中国深圳、上海、成都的团队的总负责人。那我把时间交给我们的 Venus， 谢谢。
好，大家晚上好，在这个北美时间已经是晚上快10点了哈，可能听了这么久比较累了，所以为了让大家这个精神一下，我先大家看一下，带你们看一下我们在中国深圳大湾区中的湾区河套深港创新合作这个优美的环境。我就是绕着我们这个办公室的转一圈，这是我们的正北边深圳市的中轴线，然后绕到这边再看一下我们深圳湾的这个景观。我们现在是在这个深圳福田区啊，这个河套深港创新合作区，这也是一个网红打卡点，所以今天特别给大家展示一下。因为像中国区的各级政府领导过来呀，还有包括这个深圳去年的这个周年的时候，林郑月娥特首过来，都是到我们这边来必须要参访，是个网红打卡点。所以就是看一下我们的环境，然后大家这个重新的这个精神一下，我就开始切入正题了。好，那在此之前的话，我也先讲一下，就是 作为大同教育在中国的总负责人，那么我们在这边的话是运营的名称叫做博英国际教育。那我们的口号就是来博英读世界名校。我们的背景呢是由资深的国际教育专家成立的。那么是包括我们现在所在的环境是除了深港河套创新合作区之外，我们也是香港科技大学深圳深港创新协同创新研究院所在地。那因为香港科技大学港科大研究开发深圳有限公司也是我们一个股东。那我们主要的我们的主要的定位就是指点海外的名校，引进世界一流的线上线下的教育资源，然后为中国的家长们提供 K 到12阶段，还包括大学本硕博阶段的这个一站式的海外升学规划，还有相关的一些背景提升的项目。那除此之外呢，我们还是香港科技大学深圳研究院旗下的拉海湾孵化港的成员单位，也是加拿大安省教育厅官方高中文凭 OSSD 的远程的授课注册和考试中心。我相信这个在北美的伙伴们已经非常的熟悉了。然后我们也是英国哈罗的在线国际课程在大中华区的官方的合作伙伴。OK， 那我们开始讲讲今天我介绍的一个规划的重点。因为今天我们的嘉宾的分享们都非常的精彩，主要是藤校主题的。那么其实要进入藤校的话，首先在前一步的话就是我们的高中阶段，能进入到一个好的国际高中，才决定我们的下一步能够去到什么样档次的学校。像我们的嘉宾 Nagisa 这样的一个优秀的学生，其实非常非常不容易的，能从一个普通的高中申请到一个这样 MIT 世界今年的全球排名是第1的学校，这是非常罕见的，也需要学。
你能看到你的屏幕吧？我给你
看到了，也需要学生有这个天赋异禀才能够实现的。但是我们毕竟大部分的孩子，我们针对的是一个比较普通的，就是大众化的一个学生的市场。那么我们必须就是帮孩子们能够做到帮助家长和孩子们规划好，就是让他们在一个在毕竟我们生活在相对资源还是比较丰富的地方，像是中国的一些主要的1线城市，还有加拿大多伦多或者是美国这样的地方，甚至香港都是比较资源丰富的。那么我们希望就今天通过我的分享来让家长们就知道在我们资源丰富的生活环境下，如何帮助孩子做好他的各个阶段的学习规划，尤其是今天的重点是高中阶段的规划，然后成功的把孩子们送到一个他心目当中理想的大学。那先从我们大同教育在这个规划的不同阶段说起吧。那 K 到3年级其实是一个探索萌芽阶段，那么我认为这个阶段的话，重点就是说孩子的广度的探索他的天赋异禀和潜能，了解这个孩子，因为他是这个刚刚进入到学习阶段的一个小学生，甚至幼儿园的学生，那么他对于家长来讲就是一个广度探索，给他尽可能的去接触各种各样的事物和兴趣。那这个阶段非常重要的是学习兴趣的养成期。为什么说是学习兴趣养成期？那我接触到很多家长会跟我说，那孩子到了高中或者到了小学就发现了就很头疼，不爱学习，然后什么书都不爱看，作业也不爱写，对学习没有兴趣，没有求知欲。那我认为其实最大的原因就是在这个阶段没有做好学习兴趣的启蒙，所以这个阶段的话是学习兴趣启蒙的阶段。那么它也是就是语言专家们教育专家们都知道的，已经是广泛认可的一点，就是说它是语言学习的最佳敏感期。那为什么提到语言？因为对于想考国际大学的家长都会知道，你要想出国去读大学，最基本的一项就是你的语言必须非常的优秀，要不然你是不可能获得名校的 offer 的，学术成绩都还是第2位的。然后呢，就是说在这个阶段哈，有一少部分家庭会有一些教育路径的早规划了，譬如说我选的是国际幼儿园，还是国际化的小学，还是本土化的。然后到了这个3到6年级的话，那就已经到了小升初规划的阶段了。为什么会这么早？其实不同的国家的教育体系不同，我们就以这个，因为我们既然是目标就已经在规划未来就是申请国际化大学的话，那么其实可能我们一路上就会想怎么样帮小孩子打好基础，怎么样进入到国际高中。那么我举个例子来说，对于英国方向的高中来说，3到6年级已经是他决定他能否进入到英国顶尖高中的一个关键年龄了。因为英国的第1次小升初考试是11加的考试， 11+就是11岁的时候，11岁正好是在我们的小学大概5年级这样的水平。那也就是在我们的小学4年级，你就要完成英国学校的择校，然后11年级参加一个全国的英国的大范围的11+的考试。然后这个时候，如果你考试通过、面试通过，表现优异，就已经可以拿到了像伊顿、哈罗还有威斯敏斯特这样的优秀的高中的 offer 了。如果说你没有规划好，对于大部分中国家长如果没有了解过的话，他们一定会错过，因为他们会觉得我初中还没升呢，我怎么就去考高中的 offer 了？当然这是不同国家有不同的规定的。然后的话，那么错过的家长的话，就是到了下一次的机会，那么就是第3次13+考试的机会。那这种考试的话，一定是越早越容易的，因为小孩子越小的时候，其实差异化的程度越小。随着年龄的增长，接触到的事物不同，接受的教育不同，成长环境不同，它一定是差距拉开的越来越大。所以到了13+的时候，你跟别人的差距又拉开更大了一截。还有就是最后一次是16+ A level 阶段，最后一次进入英国顶尖名校的机会。那这个时候到了 A level 阶段，其实大家差距已经非常大了。那么全球范围之内的话，最顶尖、最优秀的学生才能够进到一些非常好的、要求很高的学校，因为这个时候他们所保留的名额也不会很多了。所以这是一个小升初的规划。那么到了第3个阶段7、8年级就是高中升学规划的关键期了。所以基本上像我们这边的话，小孩子一上初中，家长就会开始关心就是下一步我们开始考虑上什么样的一个高中的问题。根据小孩的状况和家庭的一个目标，非常喜欢留在国内读大学的，那么就少操点心。但一旦涉及到你是想考国外大学的，那一定就涉及到我要选一个什么样的高中，然后怎么样才能够进去的问题。所以我们从初1就开始，就是7、8年级就开始做，根据他大学的初步的大学升学目标的方向、国家的方向、专业的方向，然后帮他选择适合的国际高中的路径。然后还有这个阶段也要非常注重就是专业兴趣的深度开发。因为从小学到初中，那么小孩子的兴趣其实已经是要在专业领域有一些突出的超强的兴趣和求知欲的领域，然后有一些深度探索。我举个例子，我们就发现有一些孩子其实在小学高年级和初中阶段就已经表现出来，就是说对于医学非常强烈的兴趣，或者对生物非常强烈的兴趣。那么孩子们在这个领域的话，就已经独立自主的可以通过这个 Google 搜索呀，各种网络的资源，可以学习到非常专业的知识。这时候他们的知识量在这个领域可能已经超过了任何一个普通的一个成年人。然后到了9到11年级的时候，就是已经进了一个应该是一个合适的高中，适合匹配他大学申请的高中。那么在这个阶段最重要就是我们的10项全能背景提升。所谓10项全能就包括了学术呀，也包括课外，像刚才我们嘉宾讲到的 extracurriculum， 还有包括一些课外的 club， 还有包括像是一些你的学习标化成绩的提升，这个都包括了。那么12年级就是收割你的梦校的一个流程。那么到了大学阶段的话，还会涉及到一个 GPA 的管理和进修和就业的指导。因为的话，其实有一部分学生，我们看到我们的嘉宾都非常的优秀，基本是从本科到硕士到博士，一路都是这种名校下来的。但是也会有一些孩子可能因为各种原因，本科留在国内读的，或者本科升上了一个其他的大学，然后到了研究生阶段，他希望再冲刺一下更高规模的学校，或者是他心目当中更优秀的学校。那么这个时候的话，那我们都知道，其实冲刺研究生的时候，你的本科的院校的层级和你的本科阶段的 GPA 和综合的表现就非常的重要。但所以这个规划要从大1就开始。如果说你到了大3快毕业了之后，再来想说我要申请研究生做规划，其实已经为时过晚了，因为你的 GPA 已经形成了，是无法逆转的一个形成。这是我们就是大同教育总体的一个规划的时间轴。那么现在的话，那我们就是重点讲就是高中的一个规划。在高中课程这方面的话，其实有几个主要的高中在这个，我就重点讲我们国内的学生客户群的吧。主要的高中体系的话，那么第一个是英国的高中，英国高中是4年 ，IGCSE 2年 ，A level 2年。然后美国的高中课程和美国大学先修课程 AP， 为什么这个有美高课程也有美国的 AP 课程？因为其实AP 课程是大家说的比较多的，但是它并不是一个高中的标准课程，它是大学先修课程，是学生额外选择的，证明自己能力突出，可以适应大学的学习生活而选择的课程。但是真正的美高课程，它也没有一个，不像英国和其他国家高中有一个专业的名字，它没有名字，就叫美高课程。 然后就是加拿大的高中课程，那以安大略省为例，它叫做 OSSD， 就是安大略省的国际高中文凭，每个省的名称又不太一样。然后香港的高中就是 HKDSE， 然后还有 IBDP 是整个 IB 阶段的这个高中阶段的文凭。那有一点时间到了，我就再迅速过一下各种高中的一个差异吧，就最后一页啊。细化的我就不讲了。如果说家长们对于高中的选择有比较详细的对比咨询的需求的话呢，那可以添加这个页面上我的微信，我们再帮大家做一个高中的细节的规划。在这我就简单的介绍一下各种高中体系的就是从课程类型到学制到考试要求，做一个就是优势对比分析，应该说比较竞争优势吧，不能是绝对的优势。那课程的类别包括英国的高中的话，像是这个它的学制是4年。那美国它也是4年，加拿大也4年，然后香港 DSE 是3年。那 IBDP 阶段属于 IB 体系最后2年，最后的阶段是2年。然后呢，他们的考试评估的话也有比较大的差异，像英国的高中，还有这个美国的高中，还有像是英国的香港的高中和IB 体系的高中，他们统一都是有一个全球性质的统一考试的，或者是全国范围内统一考试。然后有一个高中是比较特别的，就是加拿大的 OSSD 的这个高中，它是通过学校自主过程式评估和这个期末的评估综合来形成的，所以说它是一个就是唯一的一个不是统一考试的评估。那升学的要求的话，就是考大学的要求，像是英国的 A Level 是提交最后的这个学年 A Level 第2年的3或者4门的 A Level 考试成绩，那么他们都是全球认可，可以申请世界各国大学的。然后像美国的像是加拿大的高中的话，是提交12年级最理想的6门的成绩就可以了。然后呢，在全球认可度方向，基本都是全球认可的。那么习惯上来讲，学生如果想申请英国大学，会首选英国的高中，比较 D level 的是最多的，但其实是全球大学都可以申请，包括美国、加拿大这些都可以申请。然后美国的高中也当然是全球认可的，但是也是申请美国方向大学，尤其冲刺藤校的孩子们的首选。加拿大的 OSSD 高中也是一样，那么它的最大优势就是申请加拿大顶尖大学的优势极为突出，是以本地生的身份的。香港的高中也是一样，它的身份，它的优势又体现在说，它不仅可以申请就是全世界各地的国际大学，它还可以说对于香港的孩子来讲，还可以申请中国的清华、北大这样的一些国内的大学。然后 IB 国际高中那就更加不用说了，它的名字本身就是个国际文凭课程。那竞争优势来讲的话 ，A Level 高中，英国的高中，我认为它是考试科目最少的，3门课就可以考大学，就是比较擅长于，比较适合那些就是偏科特别厉害的，它有利于学生扬长避短 ，focus 在它最擅长的领域。那美国的高中是冲刺藤校的学生的一个首选啊。然后呢，加拿大高中优势也非常的明显，那它是唯一的一个不是通过一次性的考试来决定它的去向的一个考。那也可以远程注册加拿大的学籍，本地生的学籍，然后可以打个比方，就说有北京的学籍的身份来申请北京大学一样，有非常优厚的条件。然后 DSE 的话是唯一可以选的中文作为考试语言的一个考试。然后 IBDP 的话，它是比较适合全面而均衡发展，学习能力基础扎实的英语基础功底非常好的优秀的中国学生。那么这个是一个就是简单的各个国际高中体系的一个比较竞争优势的分析和对比。那其实深入的细节还有很多，因为时间有限，我就不多讲了。就是如果想就是细节咨询的，大家就是扫一下我的右下角的2维码，就是我们在跟我们的这个升学规划师预约一个时间，进行1对1的互动，好吧？那我就把时间还给 Maria， 好，拜拜。
好的，谢谢啊，感谢我们 Venus 给大伙儿把高中方面做了一个详细的比较。好的，那各位直播间的小伙伴们啊，那我们那个在美歌大同教育呢，每个月我们有2场公益讲座，再一次给大伙儿强调一下。那我们每个月的最后一个周日呢，加东晚8点啊，我们会有呢这个一场名校直通车，然后我们呢在每个月的第2个周日晚上8点，我们会有一个音乐学院的讲座。那我在这里呢，实际上。一方面要感谢所有的主讲嘉宾，另外一方面呢，也是想花很短的10分钟的时间啊，这个跟大家简单的做一个疼妈啊，我的一些感受跟大伙儿分享一下。叫作为家长，你准备好了吗？其实我有一个特别的好消息要跟大伙儿讲。我在5月底的时候呢，会去参加我女儿啊 Ruby 的 好朋友的一个 MIT 的一个毕业典礼，我相信我在那里呢会有很多深刻的感受，会给大家拍很多好照片，所以大伙儿可以这个加一下啊，这个我的朋友圈啊，这个因为我最近呢心情特别好啊，所以呢愿意跟大伙儿可以有更多的一些分享啊，大家可以加一下啊 ，Maria 孙 VIC6啊，可以加一下 Maria 孙 VIC6啊，然后5月底的时候，然后8月底的时候呢，这个我有一个私人的特别的喜讯啊，这个8月底我有一个我个人的一个特别大的喜讯，我女儿呢 Ruby 会带领大约60多个哈佛和 MIT 的博士生，然后来多伦多。如果大家也希望能够有机会和他们交流的话呢，那也可以加我们 Terry 啊，我们的 Terry 负责人啊，他的微信号可以简单的咨询一下这件事情啊，就是在8月底的时候啊，这个正好是他们开学前的最后一周啊，可以加 Terry 说，哎，这个希望和这60多个孩子有个面对面，包括我们今天的 Nagisa 啊，包括我们上一个月的 Connie 啊，都会和大家有机会见面，好吗？所以亲爱的小伙伴们，作为家长啊，您是否已经准备好了？我希望跟大伙交流一件事情，就是每个孩子的成功其实都被设计出来的。其实呢，维多利亚就是我们的那个大藤教育这边呢，我们其实就是帮助大家找到能帮您来进行设计的这个老师。那这个老师是谁呢？这个老师呢，通常是2类人，一类人呢，比如说就是呢，像 Nagisa 呢，他是会愿意啊帮助我们的一些高中生们能够帮助我们的论文撰写呀，帮助我们这个面试技巧啊等等，我觉得这方面是他很擅长的。然后另外一方面呢，我们也会有一些就是招生官啊，比如说那个我们小云老师，他有斯坦福的招生官啊等等，都是和他配合一起来帮助大家。那其实深读藤校真的是挺难的一件事情啊，因为我们直播间里呢，我相信呢，大部分家长呢都已经是孩子很优秀，不是说啊，就是说哎高中的问题，而是说呢，那我怎么样能够在高中成绩保持90分以上的情况下，我还至少啊能够呢有多项其他方面的才华，才有可能呢这个距离名校我们到底有多远？其实我告诉大家，我们从10个方面来准备，一个呢就是我们校内成绩应该是90分以上。我不知道刚才填登记的家长啊，有多少孩子的成绩是90分以上，而且孩子在几年级？如果孩子呢相对来讲啊，这个比如说7年级、8年级啊，这个9年级、10年级、11年级啊，我认为还是有机会冲上去的啊。如果孩子呢这个已经11年级、12年级，那我们可能在其他方面就要快马加鞭来弥补一下成绩方面啊。所以成绩呢90分以上，另外 AP 课程呢至少是2门的 AP 课程考试啊，这个当然越多越好啊。然后再另外呢就是说呢，我们还有呢就是 SAT 和 ACT 啊，就标准化测试成绩啊，这个也是我们非常有必要的。再另外呢就是学术竞赛的成绩，那这些成绩呢就是我们的4维空间，那另外呢就是我们的6维空间啊。那6维软技能呢包括什么呢？就是 summer 啊，就是你的暑假做什么？刚才呢 Nagisa 其实提到了一点啊，就是暑假这个他提了一些建议，像我们最近刚刚给我们的一个孩子啊，他是想商科方面，我们给他申请的是 Brown 啊大学的，然后包括呢 Ruby 当时呢他的第一个9年级的暑假呢，他是 Smith College， 第二个实际上是加拿大本地的Shedd Valley 啊，然后这个都不错，其实加拿大本地有一些非常好的这个下校啊，但是这个都要提前半年去申请，下校一点都不容易，像一个小的一个申请大学的 application 一样，我认为那是一种训练啊，提前让我们做好准备。然后另外呢，就是你的社区义工，你的 volunteer， 那可能最好是能做一些和您将来有帮助的，像 Jenny 啊，她当时就是在社区里边，包括在教会里边为老人呐、为孩子啊，然后这对她奠定了非常好的基础，她将来去读呢就是 lawyer 啊，读律师。再另外呢就是我们的 club 活动啊，我们到底可以做什么啊？ 还有就是我们的 research 成绩，其实那个 Nagisa 也提到了，包括他有一些照片啊，这个没放出来，但他发给我这边，就是他当时呢，就是做了化学实验啊等等，就是一看是感觉不一样。再另外呢，我们有哪方面的音乐和体育特长？我跟 Terry 商量过几次，我说我甚至在想，我说我们所有大藤的这些孩子，因为我们自己有音乐学院，要不要给这些孩子全部把音乐给配备上啊？因为我们可能很多家长呢会感觉说，哎，这个到底这些孩子的这个特长是怎样培养出来的？其实就是到底这些学习好的孩子，音乐方面或者体育方面要不要有一个特长？其实我发现一件事情啊，像那个我们第二个主讲人Nicholas，他的小提琴和他的钢琴。到了演奏，就是在法国都到了演奏级的水平啊。这个 Ruby 的那个他的钢琴是10级，然后他自己后来就特别后悔说：“妈妈，当时你为什么不再逼我一下，我就把演奏级应该考出来？”就是实际上是很有帮助。像是 Connie， 他是当时他们州立大学里就州立啊这个乐队的这个黑管啊就是黑管，这个是属于啊这个首席黑管手，也是做的特别棒。另外呢，就有哪些发明创造力的成就？我相信很多家长看完这10项全能呢，这个倒吸一口冷气，会觉得这太吓人了啊！但是呢，还是那句话，校长想鼓励大家。你看 Nagisa 就是一个非常好的鼓励，他其实普通高中，但是呢，他把所有的资源可以用到最佳啊。那另外一点呢，就是其实我想告诉大家呢，就是作为家长呢，我们希望大家能够具备2个概念。就是这是一场仗，这场仗要打赢，就是我们要爬上这个山顶，是需要家长和孩子一起努力的。第一呢，就是教育是改变阶层固化的唯一方法；第二，父母是孩子的起点啊。其实呢，就是很多国家拍过这种纪录片，包括《人生7年》啊，当时是英国拍的这个纪录片，日本也拍过一个纪录片啊，包括最近就是国内也拍了一个90后的孩子啊。那实际上你会发现呢，就是不管是哪里。这些孩子的成长路径其实都告诉我们这个事情。就是当时我看《人生7年》呢，我特别的感动，因为作为一个资深的教育者呢，我真的是意识到肩膀上的这个担子有多重啊！就是基本上没有，就是他拍的这个，就是他跟踪了一共14个孩子。只有1个孩子突破了他的阶层，从贫民窟走到了这个相当于就是说大学教授，是因为这个孩子呢是坚持接受教育的，他非常幸运，在他中学的时候遇到了一个特别好的老师，然后告诉他，就说教育是改变阶层固化的唯一方法。所以这个孩子呢叫 Peter， 当时啊他是最后他是大学教授，其他的孩子都没有突破自己原有的阶层啊，所以呢就是说呢。第二个呢，就是父母是孩子起点，就是不能让孩子呢，真正的起点不是学区房，不是经济条件，而是呢也不是说上了多少辅导班，而是希望呢父母能够做到了如下的3点，做到这如下3点呢，最平凡最普通的父母同样能够培养出最懂事最上进最优秀的孩子。那为了藤校梦呢，第一点我希望父母能够做到充分发掘孩子的潜力，然后因为呢我们总是想呢把最好的留给孩子，希望呢说让孩子幸福，所以很多家长呢说我不想逼着孩子去学习，这很累，我不想去激娃，然后但实际上我想告诉大家，我们留给孩子最重要的礼物是帮助他们发展本来他们认为不可能具备的能力，挖掘出他们的潜能，才让这些孩子。就一个人什么是幸福？我自己的体会就是你能够永远能够就是把你的潜能发挥到最大处，然后要用什么样的方法，付出怎样的努力。所以呢，我希望呢充分挖掘孩子的潜力啊。所以在这种情况下，其实呢，这个父母有责任有义务来告诉孩子说，其实我们可以看到山顶上的这个景色。这是为什么呢？我在这里啊，我推荐我们的一个活动。我们这个活动呢，实际上是今年夏天马上要开始了啊。我们只有10个家庭啊，现在已经有一些家庭报名啊。就是什么呢？就是我们在今年夏天会组织一次呢美东名校游。那这个美东名校游呢，我们一共是会去10所大学。那这10所大学呢，就是包括呢8所藤校。 因为藤校全部是集中在东部嘛，然后另外呢，包括 MIT 呢，它因为比较新的大学啊，所以它还不是藤校，虽然呢这么有名气啊。另外呢，包括呢就是纽约大学，因为纽约大学呢，我其实挺推荐的。当时 Ruby 我们是按照田忌赛马的方式，然后就是初级啊，就是这个保底的大学，然后中等的大学，高就是能够欠着脚尖勾到的大学。纽约大学其实 Ruby 当时也拿到，我们拿了3个藤校 offer， 我们都在犹豫是不是去纽约大学，因为呢它的这个城市真的是太棒了。所以呢，如果大家想参加1周的这个游学团啊，这个很有特色的一个游学团，是藤校的博士和教授会和大家一直有互动。那大家呢7月份啊，在7月份的最后1周可以加我们 Terry 看一下。我为什么会积极的想去组织这个活动呢？原因非常简单，就是呢，我特别的希望大家能够干什么呢？能够让孩子确定一个不一样的目标。那这个目标呢，他们需要耳濡目染，他要进到这个藤校这个里边的这个氛围，他看到啊，当时这个我们去那个普林斯顿啊，说这个是爱因斯坦曾经做过这个研究的一个楼，哎呀，我就感觉完全不一样啊。那第二个呢，就是所以这个是第一点，发掘孩子的潜能。第二点呢，就是人生必须要有目标。那这个目标呢，是必须通过坚持和奋斗才能达到这个目标，不是一个特别容易的目标。如果一个特别容易的目标就不叫目标，只是去做了一件事情。所以呢，这个任何优秀的背后都有别人看不见的、体会不了的努力和坚持。所以呢，就是越是容易松懈的时候，越要努力。当我们感觉痛苦的时候，我们正在走上坡路。所以爬藤不是一个短跑，而是一场马拉松啊！这个孩子优秀呢，其实是这个父母的汗水。其实对父母来讲，孩子的教育是一种长期坚持啊。另外呢，就是说呢，这个父母必须具备的第3个素质，永远把教育放在第一位。很多父母说啊，就是我很忙，然后我其实也很忙啊，然后很多父母呢，这个可能呢觉得，哎呀，有必要给孩子在中学的时候投入这么多吗？我来跟大伙讲一个我自己深刻体会的一件事情，那就是呢，如果我们整个家庭只有1分钱，那就把这1分钱花在孩子在中学阶段的教育上。这是我自己体会非常深刻的，因为如果他们一旦上了大学，后面其实呢，某种程度上已经是天高任鸟飞，因为这个翅膀你已经给它插上去了。然后某种程度上，你即使想为他们投入，你都没有办法帮到他们，因为那个是一个不一样的一个世界。但现在呢，就是如果我们可以花更多的时间，然后花更多的这种金钱方面的投入放在孩子身上，尤其在他的性格养成，包括他人生面临最重要的第一个，就是改变他整个这个就是人生的轨迹的这样一个重要时刻，就是升读大学。其实北美和中国是一样的，学习考大学仍然是每一个人最重要的改变我们命运的和改变我们的这个整个轨迹的最重要的一个渠道，对于大部分就是我们平民的孩子来讲。所以呢，可以我们可以借一所使。我记得中国有一位非常著名的作家这个他当时讲到，就是他妈妈就是说真的把全家所有的这个牛然后呢这个收入这个就是全卖掉，后来让他去上学，说了一句话，说孩子，我们呢可以呢不吃多么山珍海味，我们也可以呢不需要穿多么华丽的衣服，但是呢我们一定不能省在教育方面。这个我觉得希望这个大家能够记住一件事情，就是我们的孩子属于明天，属于我们做梦也没有办法达到的明天。尤其是我们已经人在北美，我们为了来到北美，我们放弃了国内所有优越的条件，那我们在这里我们必须要做到一件事情，那就是我们要对得起我们远渡重洋来到北美。我们当年的一个初衷一定是希望孩子更容易接受到世界一流的教育，所以呢我们唯一能做的就是给孩子插上腾飞的翅膀，让他在梦想的天空中能够翱翔。 所以，亲爱的小伙伴们啊，这个家长们，这个我希望啊，这3点素质能够记住啊。那我们呢，我们能为大家做什么呢？就是我们希望带领我们的孩子，如果是山脚的孩子也没关系，每个孩子天赋不一样，每个孩子他在曾经走过的路不一样。但是呢，一个人只要有梦想，任何时候开始努力，然后开始规划都不晚。那我们山脚的孩子，我们愿意一起努力呢，这个托举这个孩子到山腰。如果山腰的孩子，我们愿意呢陪他爬到山顶。那如果山顶的孩子，我们希望能够跟着他，陪着他一起呢冲到这个一览众山小的泰山顶上啊。所以呢，这个我们愿意帮助大家呢，能够这个孩子们鸟瞰整个世界啊。其实呢，没有每一个创造出奇迹的孩子都是所有人的奋力托举啊。那我们会为大家做什么呢？就是我需要来了解我们每一个，像我们的小云老师，像我们的每一个大藤的博士，比如说今晚的 Nagisa 啊，然后他会呢给大家每个孩子做一个呢分析。所以为什么大伙一定要争取到那个1对1预约？因为1对1预约的时候呢，老师真的是会给你一个特别好的建议。我们的孩子适合学医学、生物还是化学？我们的孩子适合学这种高科技类的，还是我们的孩子适合学文商类的啊？所以呢，那我们把孩子他的目标找到以后呢，因为基本上大部分我们华裔的孩子不会超出这3个方向啊，就医学、生物、化学、高科技、文商啊。那我们呢，这个能做什么呢？就是我们要做2件事情。就是一个是叫2个保姆纵队，一个保姆纵队呢，为他画出清晰的行进路线图。那这个清晰的行进路线图呢，实际上就是什么呢？就是我们的叫做1对1的coaching， 就是我们整个藤校的规划。那这里边呢，我们以文商类的孩子为例，那文商可以选择的专业。记住啊，就是哈佛当然是最好的，这个但是不是说所有哈佛大学的专业，然后呢都是这个专业里最好的这个大学，所以我们要知道它的专业对应的最好的大学到底是什么。比如说，如果说经济学，那芝加哥大学也非常棒啊。这个我女儿是芝加哥大学的本科，然后她的同学今年是芝加哥大学一共全世界招了12个经济学的博士。然后他同学当中有很多本科是哈佛的，然后他认为芝加哥大学的经济打下了非常 solid 的这个 foundation， 所以呢，比哈佛大学的经济学也并没有差多少啊。然后包括呢，比如说你哥伦比亚大学啊，那你法律啊，然后商科啊等等啊，这个包括我们本土的多大呀，然后到底哪些大学最好？商学院这个医学院，比如说 McGill 啊，非常棒啊。那我们呢，把专业选出来，把大学选出来。然后我们接着呢，也会告诉大家，将来呢，这个专业毕业的孩子可以去做什么。所以上一次呢 ，Connie 他是讲呢，就是医学政策，其实这是一个比较新的一个方向，讲得非常棒啊。那我们就给大伙规划时间轴啊，这个应该是上面全部有文字，但这个 PPT 这个一直显示不出来，就是我们细致到每个月、每2周孩子要做什么。然后我们的大藤博士或者我们的招生官，然后呢，这个会给大家，这是我们的保姆纵队1，然后盯着大家，每2个星期和孩子见一次，然后告诉大家我们下2周的目标是什么，就升级打怪一样往上走啊。那我们要提前准备今年的 SAT， 然后呢我们要把它考完，然后今年的 AP 我们要考几门，然后我们马上这个还有半年就要申请 Summer Camp 了，那我们要申请 Summer Camp。我相信很多家长可能从来没有想过啊，其实我们可以这样来规划孩子的时间。如果您不知道孩子这个星期在做什么，如果您不知道他今天在做什么，我觉得非常有必要啊，这个跟我们的大藤规划师可以聊一下啊。然后再另外呢，我们把竞赛，就是每个月全世界啊，尤其北美这边的这种顶级的竞赛，全部给大家已经找出来了。您不需要说孩子自个去找这些资源，我们找出来告诉大家，孩子说，比如说你要参加代卡竞赛，为什么你要参加代卡竞赛？因为将来你想去读 Word 商学院 ，Word 商学院对 DECA 是非常看重的啊。当时 Heather 呢，他的这个 AP 只考了1门，实际上，但是因为人家的 DECA 真的是太厉害了，所以呢，他是整个这个安省的 Executive 所以人家就很容易拿到这个就是沃德商学院这都是我们被成功录取的孩子的这个大家都认识的哈佛耶鲁然后呢这个 Princeton MIT 等等然后所以呢这是我们呢会为大家做的一些事情我自己特别想把这句话送给大家，叫我们生而平凡，因为有神的光环，所以呢这个生命的火已被点燃，此心此生无憾，让我们一起为梦想拼搏有朋友问我看一下OK 没有任何一项事业比培养优秀的孩子构建幸福的家庭更伟大这是我和 Ruby 我女儿的合影这个有人家长问说8月底有什么大活动怎样能参加这个可能有一些朋友知道这个 Ruby 的爸爸在5年前去世这个所以 Ruby 也是顶着很大的一些压力，包括呢这个你觉得这个年纪的孩子不能承受的苦痛走到了这一步所以呢这也是为什么我希望能够做大藤教育的根本原因，就是因为呢这个我希望能够把他父亲教给他的在他身上做的所有的这些行之有效的方法能够呢奉献给更多的孩子我在此特别的感谢我们的这个就是温哥华团队、美国团队包括我们中国团队的这个包括非营利组织这个华联会等等对大藤教育的帮助8月底呢我们有大藤教育基金会正式成立我会把我自己的我有一个喜事我8月底会结婚这个我再次50岁嫁给爱情，然后我会把我婚礼的礼金然后捐赠给大藤教育基金会，然后在大藤教育基金会呢这个我希望能够赞助一些家庭虽然贫困，但是呢这个孩子仍然愿意呢这个追求梦想，我希望能够赞助给这样一些孩子，所以女儿呢会带大约60多个吧，现在人数不断增加中就是哈佛的 MIT 的耶鲁的孩子，然后从美国他们很多人是第一次来加拿大，然后8月27号来到多伦多，所以如果那些家长说我希望有机会也可以跟我们的 Terry 联系这个我也希望真的是大藤教育基金会的成立典礼能够呢成为一个盛事，能够在我们这一代人身上能够印证或者回忆这一生很美好发生过这么一件事情，好吧？所以任何一项事业比培养没有任何一项事业比培养优秀的孩子构建幸福的家庭更加的伟大，希望每个孩子都能够在父母守望的麦田里长得金黄又饱满，结出最甜美的果实希望能够做到这一点那我最后呢实际上这个希望再一次呢跟大家讲一下，希望别让平凡的生活耗尽我们所有的向往，愿你我忠于自己，披星戴月培养最好的子女，听我们的内心在说什么，听我们的内心告诉我们自己说我希望我的孩子非常的幸福，那就请您把您能够做到的您的时间，然后包括呢您能够为他做的所有的事情放到他的中学阶段，因为这是他人生最重要的一个阶段这个是我相信所有为人父母都希望坐在这里这段话呢这个是我专门请我们的大藤的导师团们为大家写的一段话，其实我是回忆起呢2000年这个2000年真的是2000年这个就是22年前呢，当时南方周末它的发刊语在1月1号新年的第一天，阳光打在你的脸上，温暖在我们的心中，我们不停地为您加油，因您的希望就是我们的希望这个我也把这句话送给我们所有的直播间里的父母们，我们和您一起挥汗如雨，我们和您一起咬紧牙关，陪伴孩子爬藤的路真的不容易但我们和您一起，我们和您一起笑逐颜开，拿到 offer 的那种感觉，我相信你永远都不能够体会。我在女儿拿到哈佛 offer 那一刻，我觉得我得到的所有的荣耀，因为我真的是荣誉等身都没有在那一刻来的幸福更加的巨大而真实，所以这是我真实的做一个疼妈的感受。我们和您一起鼓满粮仓，就是我们鼓满粮仓，就是看到我们的孩子能够发挥出他的潜能，能够就是幸福的来追求他的梦想。 所以再一次希望能够对所有的家长有个很好的鼓励那亲爱的小伙伴们我们再一次呢感谢大家的聆听。那最后再给大家看一眼，就是如果您刚才还没有扫码，这个希望跟我们的 Nagisa 或者我们的小云老师进行预约的话，那我们最后再给大家机会进行一下这个预约进行一下这个预约这个我们这个藤校这个顾问，大家请一定如实的填写孩子的情况因为这个是咱自己的事情。另外呢，也请大家加我们的 Terry 他为每一场讲座付出了很多这个然后跟他呢可以说我已经预约，填好预约表，因为没有填预约表，只是说预约，我们可能没有办法安排，所以大家可以看一下。另外呢，也是希望大家不要忘记5月8号周日晚上8点钟，我们会有一场 AP 的讲座，然后5月15号加东晚上8点钟，我们会有一场呢这个音乐的讲座这个是专门一个声乐专业指导声乐专业指导这个再另外呢，就是我们会在5月29号每个月固定的最后一个周日晚上，我们会有一个大堂的讲座，下一场将非常的精彩，因为下一场呢将首次谈到了医学院和商学院，同一个姑娘能够又读医学院又读商学院，怎样的美女学霸呢？我们下一场5月29号不要错过这正好那一次呢，我人会在波士顿我可能呢这个不只是我们的茱莉亚，我可能会邀请我在就是我在 MIT 这个5月29号那天我住在 MIT， 我要求呢 MIT 这个我要求这个在 MIT 里边住所以他正好给这个所有去参加这个毕业典礼的家属们这个有一个宿舍提供，所以我就住在宿舍里边，我可能会有更多的一些感受给大家这个来分享一下，所以希望大家不要错过这些那我们呢这个亲爱的小伙伴们我最后再给大家这个一个重要的分享今天呢，因为我们刚开始的时候，可能很多朋友呢这个注意到一件事情，就是通常呢这是我们共学营的号，那共学营呢我们会这个其实我们是维多利亚的共学营，但是呢因为我们是大藤教育的讲座，所以我们没有介绍周一到周日每天晚上共学营有什么讲座但是其实周一到周日固定这个 Zoom ID 我们都会有职业教育的、地产投资的，然后呢包括金融投资的一些讲座，所以呢我们的共学营的coordinator 我们的达姆其实等待了一晚上，也希望呢大藤教育圆满这个讲座圆满这个完成之后呢，可以跟大伙呢有个5分钟，然后再给大伙介绍一下共学营，所以也希望大伙能够听一下。另外呢这个我有一段音乐，一个这个是我们音乐学院的Amanda 老师为11月30号我和 Ruby 在他父亲去世4周年的时候呢，有这么一段这个音乐，然后配上呢这个我和 Ruby 的一些照片。那这个视频的剪辑呢是我现在的这个先生我也非常感谢这个麦克老师，然后呢他为我们剪辑的，如果大家可以听到最后也可以看到因为我觉得在这个世界上其实呢我们永远都不会丧失爱的能力，而且无论我们经历多少困难，经历了多少苦难，我们都要记住，在这个世界上，我希望我们能够把最好的爱给我们的家人，然后给我们的子女所以再一次希望我们大藤教育，您的孩子藤校梦想从这里起飞我美国这个是我们美国的联系电话，如果有美国的小伙伴们510-926-8828，多伦多416-720-1268，然后温哥华778-688-8018然后中国135-6107-8511然后网站也可以看到更多老师的介绍，但这个网站是电脑版的这个手机上不了所以呢我看一下我怎么把它 stop 掉。好的，那我那个就把时间交给谢谢这个交给我们的达姆交给我们的达姆达姆您可以分享一下您的这个屏幕可以分享一下您的屏幕。好的，那直播间的小伙伴们再一次感谢大家的聆听， 也感谢我们所有的合作伙伴，感谢我们所有分部的负责人啊，我们又度过了美好的一个晚上。Nagisa 真的是我非常遗憾，我刚才在这个另外一个会议里边啊，这个有我们埃德蒙顿的分校会议里边没有跟 Nagisa 这个道别啊，我非常遗憾，觉得特别对不住这个孩子啊。但是5月底我就会见到他了，8月份他也会飞到多伦多来参加我的婚礼，所以呢，有机会可以和他面对面见啊。好，那我们把时间交给我们的达姆，感谢大家，谢谢。